Hi everyone! In this video, I will be covering my pull plans in DFFOO Global, covering specifically the upcoming arc where Rinoa will be a synergy or featured character. These events are also covered on the cropped infographic on the left hand side of the slide, and this infographic is derived from the global forecast from thewereotter over on Reddit. As always, I'll be including a link in the video description to the full global forecast as well, so do check it out because it's a very handy resource to have. First off, a quick recap on how I did during Tifa's FRBT arc. As you can see, I went all in for Tifa on the very first banner that features her FRBT, and I just went in straight with gems because I really wanted to get her BT weapon on that event itself, and I didn't want to risk the chance of getting the BT just with tickets alone, so gems it was. Unfortunately, RNG was not on my side on that day, so I actually had to PT her BT weapon. It was only 120k gems because the first multi-pull was free, so in total I had to pull until I reached 500 G tokens and redeemed her BT weapon that way. Luckily, I did manage to get 2 FRs along the way to the PT, so I at least managed to fully max her out on that event, and I've used her in every event in the arc since. This also means that I have skipped all the other banners on that event, including Liut and Ferris's FR. So the final damage was 120k gems, which I guess isn't too bad even though it's a full PT, but it is over the course of an entire arc, and it is at least for Tifa, who I know I'll definitely get good use out of her. Without further ado, coming to the first event on Rinoa's arc, which will be on Dimension's End Transcendence Tier 11. There's going to be 2 banners here. The first banner featuring Rinoa's FRBT alongside a rerun of Vivi and Deus up to their LDs. The second banner will feature Shantoto's burst as the featured burst weapon, and will also otherwise have Rinoa's FR. The secondary banner characters there will be Edward and Realm. Edward, Shantoto and Deus would receive reworks as well to their base kits, but nothing much changes there. It's really more just to make them more in line with the current meta. Beyond the boosted damage and HP dumps that they get, they are otherwise functionally the same characters. Rinoa of course will get a rework herself and will get a massive boost by the introduction of both her FR and BT. To cover why that is, I'll quickly be covering both her BT and FR here. Firstly, with regards to her BT, it does provide some party-wide auras, and the party-wide auras are pretty decent as listed on the slide, but it is also very similar to many other BTs, so it doesn't stand out that way. One additional boost that her BT aura provides is that for Rinoa herself, while her BT aura is up, she also gets a 10% HP regen and also a 30% reduction to any HP damage that Rinoa herself will receive. And this helps, I guess, offset the self HP damage that she takes whenever she's in her Angel Wings stance. The big juicy part about Rinoa's BT is the fact that when you press a BT plus or when she completes a BT finisher, she will automatically transition into her Angel Wing stance, and while her BT aura is up, her Angel Wing stance will not decrease in duration. In addition, using her BT plus or BT finisher will also give her 6 uses of HP Ultima attack. Functionally, the design is very similar to what Lena or Irvine gets when they use their LD. For both Lena and Irvine, if you look back, when they use their LD, their HP attack will transition to a new form and will have limited uses. So the same thing with Rinoa's BT here, using her BT plus will give her 6 uses of HP Ultima. The strength of HP Ultima actually differs depending on which stance she's in. When she's in her Angelo stance, that attack actually does 7 HP dumps, but when she's in her Angel Wing stance, and she should be because of the fact that her Angel Wing stance does not decrease, HP Ultima is 9 HP dumps attack, which is extremely powerful considering that it is also an AoE attack. 6 uses of it is just nice, to be honest, because theoretically what you can do here is go into force time and then go into BT plus to get her Ultima, and then BT mode where you can use 6 Ultimas in a row followed by her BT finisher for some sweet damage. Her force time is also extremely powerful and really benefits herself, which is what you want anyway, since she will likely be your primary damage dealer if you bring her in your main party. Pressing Rinoa's force attack will also automatically transition her into her Angel Wing stance, and her force time also provides the party an additional 20% HP damage up effect. So if you combine that with a BT aura, that is a 50% boost to HP damage, which is quite sizable by itself. The sweet thing about Rinoa's force time is that if you look at the conditionals for her force bonuses, Rinoa herself can actually very easily hit all 4 conditionals every single turn that she takes just by using HP Ultima, for example. This means that as long as Rinoa can get multiple successive turns in a row, for example during her burst mode, she should be increasing the force bonus by at least 80% a turn, which is on the same level as Kamlanot's FR. That is extremely powerful, and given that, you are likely able to see extremely high percentages if you set up Rinoa optimally to go into FR, BT plus and BT mode with her. Due to the fact that her HP Ultima will be her hardest hitting attack and it excels at AoE damage. However, this also means that if you want to get the most out of Rinoa and optimize the damage, you do need to fully invest with her, not only on the Ultima weapon, but also the fact that she needs to be fully green so that you can make use of her Angel Wings and her HP Ultima, as well as you probably also want to max and MLB her FR, since the FR bonuses that she can get is extremely high when it is active, and it is very likely the force time that you want when you main party Rinoa herself. My plans here this time is actually using tickets instead, and the reason why this is different than my approach with Tifa is not because I like Tifa better. I actually price both Tifa and Rinoa quite highly, and to me they both sit equally at the highest tier in damage so far in the game. But because I skipped using tickets for an entire arc, my tickets are very close to expiring. In fact, by the time this event rolls around, I will have tickets that would expire in like 2 or 3 days time, so I do have to use my tickets. And since we have gotten a lot of tickets in the Spiritus Brother stage, might as well go in for her here. And I plan to throw a lot of tickets here, hoping to score her BT weapon, but I also do have BT tokens available as backup if I score her FR pretty quickly, and another option is to maybe just token her BT. Next up is Aerith's Intersecting Wheels, featuring the return of Aerith with a rework as well as a newly released FR weapon for her. Alongside her, Kurosame will also be re-released again up to his LD, and Kurosame will also be getting a rework, a much needed rework to his kit. Just quickly about Kurosame, he is still to this day quite a good call ability to have. Not only does he provide party-wide Ice Enchant in case you need it, but his call ability also provides the HP damage up debuff that at 5 stacks is a very valuable 30% HP damage up. His damage is also very much in line with the current meta now. He has improved HP dumps across his kit, and notably also his Ice Pillar attack, which is his follow-up attack you get after you use his EX, is now 2 HP dumps rather than the 1 HP dump it was before. The star on this banner though is going to be Aerith, and I really like what they've done with her rework. First off, both her S1 and S2 can actually charge the FR. Both her S1 and S2 are actually also free turns, they will not increase the turn count. Her S1 will be instant turn, and her S2 is high turn rate, which is actually, I think, having quite a lot of potential there. In 0 turn runs, for example, you can use Aerith's S1 since it's instant turn to charge the FR gauge, and you can then use S2 to pass a turn to someone else, all the while maintaining the turn count at 0, which is extremely useful. Her LD though, to me, remains the star of her kit, and the sheer utility behind that is really bonkers in my opinion. So first of all, her LD buff is called Seal Evil. That's not something new. Seal Evil will give your party a 100% debuff evasion in case you need it. One nice thing now is that it now lasts 6 turns longer than it did before, for I believe a total of 12 turns if I'm not mistaken. Essentially, her Seal Evil buff will last the entire fight. In the past, she can also land a 2-turn debuff on enemies called Planet's Admonition, and that debuff was extremely useful because it provides the usual valuable HP damage up, but while the enemies have that debuff, they also cannot grant themselves any new buffs. The drawback before is that Aerith could only land the debuff on one enemy at a time, and it lasts only for 2 turns, so Aerith used to struggle just to keep the debuff up on all enemies at all times. That problem has now been fixed because her debuff now is AoE when she attacks the enemies, and it lasts 4 turns instead of 2 turns. Aerith, in my opinion, is a very high utility character because beyond the usual supports that you get in terms of the auras and the supports and the healing and the battery, she also has the ability to provide your entire party with debuff evasion and the ability to also disable the enemies from granting themselves buffs, which can come in handy across a number of fights. The utility of preventing buffs is still quite rare to this day. Vincent's BT Aura can do that, and Yuffie's EX debuff can also do that. The sweet thing, of course, is that she also now gets access to a new FR weapon. Her FR, I guess, isn't too bad. It's somewhat decent if you really want to expand your FR roster. It does heal and battery the entire party. It is instant turn as well, so using it at the right time can really turn the table on the enemies. Her force time effects are, I guess, okay. It's not really, groundbreaking like Rinoa's FR conditionals. You've seen some of these before as well. The nice thing though is that her FR bonus starts at 150% instead of the usual 120%. While her force time is up, your entire party gets a 40% HP regen per turn. The conditionals are plus 40% if you do a modified Brave and HP attack, which is very similar to Charlotta's force. And each time you battery an ally, you get a plus 20%. If Aerith is the person that batteries the ally, you get an additional 20% for a total of 40%. Overall, my plan here is to actually skip this banner, and you might be wondering why, considering the high applause I've given to Aerith. The main reason is I already do have all of Aerith's gear up to her LD, and like I said, her LD really is the star of the show, so I'm happy enough to just make use of her without her FR. Her FR does have potential and it is decent, but to me, for one thing, I'm already quite limited in high power stones anyway, and for another, I'm also trying to save resources because I'm fairly sure that Rinoa's banner will eat a sizable chunk of my ticket stash, so I'd rather probably just skip this banner and use Aerith up to her LD. I also do already have Kurasame's gear also up to his LD as well, so there really isn't a lot of weapons that I'm missing here, really only just the FR, and for that reason I think a skip is probably better from an investment point of view. If you are a fairly new player, I would strongly recommend to at least consider pulling on this banner, because not only for Aerith, you also get access to Kurasame here as well. The next event after that will be the Heretics event featuring the release of Balthier's FR. There'll also be a secondary banner featuring Golbez's BT, because Golbez will be the secondary featured character on this banner. Golbez does receive a rework that bumps up his damage to the current meta in terms of number of HP dumps. Otherwise, his functionality as a dark DPS character still remains the same. Balthier also gets a slight modification to his kit, With this rework, his snatch shot will steal 3 buffs versus the 1 buff that it steals before. His new FR is pretty unique in a sense. When you use it, it cleanses the entire party of debuffs and it steals 3 buffs from the target that you use it on. It is also an instant turn. The conditionals are also pretty unique. If you attack an enemy that does not have any buff during your turn, you get a plus 40%. If you do any sort of range attack during your turn, you get 20%. And if you dispel a buff on an enemy, you get a whopping plus 80%. So there is actually a lot of potential here to get high FR bonuses pretty quickly with Balthier due to the plus 80% conditional there. That being said, admittedly, it is a little bit niche because for this to work and for you to rack up bonuses to very high levels, what you need to do is to consistently dispel buffs on the enemy, which then actually requires the enemy to consistently reapply buffs on themselves throughout the fight, which doesn't happen all too often. Interestingly, another way you can make use of this is to also slap a vanille sphere on one of your counter attackers, for example Ardyn. As long as that counter attack character has an E slot available, when you counter attack an enemy and you dispel their buff, you will also get a plus 80% boost. So there are ways to really make use of this and hit very high FR bonuses, which makes this overall FR a very interesting one to have and certainly sets this apart versus other FRs currently in the meta. However, like I said, it does require very specific fights for you to make full use out of this. In most other fights, the bosses may not even buff themselves, or if they do, it might just be a one-time buff and Balthier himself will very quickly wipe out all their buffs, which means that you will not be able to hit the plus 80% turn after turn after turn. I'm really on the fence on this one, to be honest. I'm always a fan of expanding my FR roster, but the two things to consider here is that again my high power stones are quite limited, and my main worry here is that even if I do get his FR, he may be spending still a lot of time on the bench just waiting for the perfect stage to come to make use of his FR. So even if I do pull here, it will just be with tickets, and I'm still leaning towards pulling actually because I want to expand my roster here, but I think I'm still maybe just waiting first to see how I do on Rinoa before making my final decision here. If I don't have to blow my entire ticket stash on Rinoa and I have some left over here, then yeah, maybe I'll spend some tickets on Balthier. But if Rinoa eats all my tickets, then I guess I just have to say sorry to Balthier and move on. Finally, we do have the Crevasse event coming up in Global, which will be a global exclusive event in line with this year's Halloween. Now at the time of making of this video, there isn't actually any official announcement on what banners we'll be getting during Crevasse, but it is in my opinion very likely going to be Ardyn, because the JP players actually got Ardyn during Tifa's cycle while we did not. So this event is probably the event where they will introduce Ardyn's FR and his rework. I won't go through into detail because I actually did cover Ardyn in my last full plan video already. Suffice it to say, his kit is actually still very valuable because he does have the whole immortality gimmick going. Once you use his LD, his HP jumps to 0, but he can't be knocked out. That alone has a lot of value actually, because not only does it guarantees his survival in a lot of cases, you could also use Ardyn to solo a number of stages. I've actually seen videos where he soloed Dimensions End Transcendence Reckoning tier 10 and I believe tier 11 as well, so there's a lot of potential there. And part of the reason is that his force weapon and force effects really benefits himself as a rebreaker and a melee attacker. With Ardyn's FR, and assuming he gets a bunch of turns in a row, you could very easily plus 70% the force bonus every single turn that he takes, which is quite a sizable bonus for a DPS character. I really like Ardyn and I would have pulled for him. The only drawback is I don't have his burst weapon, and he would require a full investment in both his FR and BT for him to work. And the main issue and the only reason why I'm skipping here is that by the time this banner comes around, I would have invested in both Tifa and Rinoa, so I already do have quite good options for damage dealers, and because I've invested in both Tifa and Rinoa, I would come very close to emptying all my BT ingots, and I do want to save at least a couple of ingots to invest in Minwoo when he comes next. So if I invest in Ardyn, then I would be forced to skip Minwoo because I don't think I have enough BT ingots to fully max out 2 burst weapons. So I just have to make a prioritization here. Okay, on this slide I cover my opinion on which characters will probably give you more bang for your buck, so to speak. So if you are limited in resources, and this doesn't only include gems and tickets, it also considers things like BT ingots. The characters that I highly recommend, of course, firstly would be Rinoa. We've just seen the sheer power that Tifa had on the release of FRBT, and just with that alone, Tifa sort of sat on a tier all on her own above all the other top tier DPS characters. I think with Rinoa here, Tifa is now not alone, so your highest tier of damage would have Tifa and Rinoa there together. And I think just saying that should at least give you an idea of how strong Rinoa is if you fully invest in her. The good thing although also is that she will complement your roster very well, because Tifa specializes in melee single target DPS, whereas Rinoa is magical AoE DPS, so you can pick and choose the DPS to bring depending on the stage. Now I put Aerith here as well in the same category, and some will probably disagree with me here. The reason why is I put a lot of value in the utility that she brings. Having the ability to heal, battery, provide strong auras to the party, debuff evasion, as well as preventing the enemies from buffing themselves goes a very long way, and I know that there are some fights where the ability to prevent enemy buffs will come in very handy as well. So at the very least, I would recommend at least picking Aerith up to her LD. As a bonus, the good thing is Aerith's banner also does have Kurosame as well, and you can see here I also put Kurosame under role fulfillment. Kurosame isn't bad, but I think he isn't as much value adding as Aerith herself. But in a nutshell, if you are missing both, you get a lot of value for the amount of gems and tickets you put into their banner. As for Balthier, Balthier is sort of like meeting a few different utilities at once, but doesn't really excel at many of them. He does provide some nice aura bot support through his overhead. He can remove enemy buffs by stealing them, and it's actually very nice to see that they model his FR very nicely after his gimmick as well. The bonuses that he can get can be absurdly extremely high, but they do come with the drawback of being extremely niche. So in the right stages and the right setup, Balthier and his FR will work wonders and will really blast through the stage. But in some other stages, probably you want to bring someone else instead of Balthier. So he's a sort of like a hit or miss sort of character depending on the stage. At the very least, I think at least consider him if you so far still don't have a lot of buff dispelling in your roster. I mentioned Ardyn here as well, and Ardyn is really a very strong self-sufficient DPS. His only drawback here is that he suffers from sort of wrong timing to his introduction. At this stage, we've had Tifa and Rinoa, and practically every BT characters that's released does require you to fully invest BT ingots to max them out, to use them at their full potential. And if the developers gave us more BT ingots, then I would likely pull and build for Ardyn as well. But for myself, and I suppose many other players, where we want to invest in Tifa plus minus Rinoa, it's very difficult to even have the BT ingots left over to go for Ardyn. Of course, there are players who like using Ardyn and who actually maybe skip either Tifa or Rinoa in favor of Ardyn. Nothing really wrong there, like I said, he's a really strong character. But I put him more in the role fulfillment category only because this arc we have Rinoa fulfilling DPS, and if you are lacking in resource to max more DPS characters, then he is potentially a character to be considered to skip. So that's it for this video. In summary, I'll be spending tickets for Rinoa's FR and BT weapon. Depending on how my ticket pools go, I may ticket token Rinoa's BT. I hope not to, because we have Minwoo coming up as well, and I do want Minwoo's FRBT, but let's see how it goes. I will be skipping Aerith's banner, but that's really only because I have both Aerith's and Kurosame's gear already, and I don't really have a lot of interest in Aerith's FR. I might ticket Balthier's FR. It's largely dependent on how many tickets I have to use for Rinoa's FRBT, so if I use up all my ticket stash or most of it, then I'll probably be skipping Balthier. But if I do have some sizable amount left, then I may just throw to get Balthier's FR. And lastly, if we do get Ardyn's banner, I'll likely be skipping that banner. I hope the video has been helpful, and as always, if you enjoyed the content, do leave a like, comment or subscribe. Really helps a lot. Till then, I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!